table, a seat for a stenographer to sit, and all the junk that one uses because we have trucks and land and buildings, and we got to get food and so on.
He's 52 years old. He's deaf in one ear. He's an egomaniac, but one of the wisest persons that I've ever met in my life.
He knows how to get people moving. He creates turbulence.
Gentlemen, until further notice, no member of the California Department of Corrections is permitted on Synanon property unless he has the express permission of Charles Dederich, Chairman, Synanon Foundation, Inc.
Anything I say, you will not do.
Really?
Like a little baby.
Really?
I want. Yes, I go. You're not a man. Your mouth don't make you a man. Could you take an order?
I'm not
you
even
couldn't
a
even
boss.
do it. I know it. You didn't say nothing. You didn't say nothing.
Take
you
it
did
easy.
not.
How do I like?
How do I like? I
you
didn't
not
break the
putting ground
window.
up?
I didn't have to say, Tony, please take it easy. And bang, you broke the window behind
window?
You cry and sinning
Tell
on
me.
about me.
Tell me.
You cry. You drop
Tell
off
me.
whenever you get a chance.
Oh,
I run. I know I run. What do you say? I'm a punk and I admit it. You over here? Why?
There's nothing like this on the planet. There are 190 of us that live here in Santa Monica. People with a drug addiction or other criminal past, or just people with problems who've entered voluntarily and are trying to find themselves and change their behavior. It's a small society. People can come and go as they please. There are no doctors, no psychiatrists, no psychologists. We are attempting to change behavior by self-help.
Well, my dad was what I suppose you would call a professional student for many years. He went to school until he was about 36 or 37 years old, accumulating one degree after another in various subjects. And my mom was the same way. She was a very excellent student. And I guess the thing that they taught me from the earliest beginnings of my life was the fact that I never was doing as well as I could do in whatever I tried to do. Didn't make any difference what it was that I was working at. I was never working up to my capabilities. So by the time I was about 12, they had sought medical assistance in stimulating my mind. And as a result, I began taking large doses of psychic energizers and whatnot by the time I was about 12. So that I never developed any self-confidence. My confidence was always in the drugs that I was taking.
I had been living with him about 3 months before I discovered that he was a user. And I started nagging him about the use because it would make him such a different person, to me. And finally, one night, he and a friend of his, I had thrown out a whole spoon of drugs that they had cooked up. And he fixed some more. And his friend held me while he gave me an injection. And I was ill. But 2 days later, I was ready to experience the whole thing over again.
I ran the streets for the next about 4 years and had gotten completely to the end of my rope by the time that I finally called my father as a very last resort and told him once and for all that I was an addict, something that he'd never admitted if he knew it. They always thought I was, and that's their term, mean and nasty, that there was something wrong with me, but that they never for a minute thought it was drugs.
And I started the whole mess over again, the hustling and the stealing and pushing when necessary. And hating myself more and being more afraid. And you see, in the beginning, I had this thing. Well, I had never been arrested, and I wasn't known too much in the town. Nobody knew that I was using, but it had come to the point now, after 15 years or so, that everyone knew me. People that I didn't even know, people in the police departments, like working in the bandit squad, knew who I was.
When I first came into Synanon, I come straight from Greenwich Village. My hair was down to here, and I walked around constantly with rose-colored sunglasses on. And I had shaved my beard just before I came to Synanon, so at least I didn't have that. And black dungarees and the dungaree jacket and this whole pseudo-intellectual beatnik image. And I came walking in the door, and there were about 5 people just going to the beach, and they were wearing bathing suits and had crew cuts. And I didn't believe they had ever shot any dope, and I thought I was in another nut house. And I walked in for my interview, and I remember the first thing they told me was, "We're going to have to cut your hair." And I knew I was in a nut house.
Marion James is not to talk about herself or her problems for 30 days.
A wizard in Synanon doesn't work in an office. He works in a room.
And he operates, we'll say, in a circle.
And whose communication lines run this way.
That's my job.
And whose communication blocks run this way.
We want to get all the CED stuff upstairs and put the rest down in the garage for now. Keep that butter in the garage. We don't need it up here.
Peggy Pless, you have a telephone call in the expediter's office. Peggy Pless, you have a telephone call in the expediter's office.
I first heard about Synanon back in 1960 at a United Nations Congress on Crime and Delinquency. A colleague of mine, a sociologist, Don Cressy, was telling me about this organization down at the beach in Santa Monica where around 50 addicts had stopped using drugs and were living in this community. This was startling to me since in my 15 years of work with the problem, I never knew any addicts who really quit using drugs. So back in '61, I went down to Synanon, and I've been exploring it ever since over the past 4 years. In the process, I married one of the young ladies there, and we have a lovely 1-year-old kid now, so Synanon has meant a great deal to me personally as well as professionally. When I first arrived, I found it rather strange. The fellow who booked me in at the desk, didn't really believe he was an addict till I saw the tracks on his arm. Then I went up and met some of the people. It looked to me a little bit like a campus co-ed kind of situation, except it was integrated. And that night I remember one incident. When we got back to the club, I was talking to Donna, who's now my wife, and I said, sort of off the top, where would you be now if there never was a Synanon? And without any hesitation, she said, dead.
They said he's a nice old fella, but he'll die using drugs.
It hadn't been too many months before my wife had committed suicide because she was an addict too, and we'd tried every possible cure.
I ended up by slashing my wrists and attempting to kill my mother.
I really was prepared to die. When I first came into Synanon, the word that described me was desperate.
And here I am, 15 months later.
I've got to stay. There's no other choice. There's either a penitentiary or life. So I'm staying.
sleep. You can't have any relationships with anybody.
When you sit in a darkened apartment looking out the window blinds, seeing if anybody's parked out in front of the house.
In and out of the jails, getting thrown up against the walls like some kind of animal every time I turned around, every time I went out.
That's what it's like to be a dope fiend.
So they cut my hair and took away my sunglasses, brought me back downstairs, put me in a living room, told me to talk to people. And I'd never done this before, just sitting around talking and saying, well, my name is so-and-so, and I've done this and such. And it was new. I couldn't do it. I just sat in the corner the first day and listened to records and wished I was home.
It's not easy for people like us.
I know how I felt when I first came in, and like if everything didn't go my way, in other words, if like the conversation didn't seem to be great all of a sudden, and I wasn't able to talk right all of a sudden, you know, like right off the top, then I would get like this and I'd start wandering around the room. I'd go in a circle from the dining room to the living room to the hall to the dining room to the living room to the hall, right?
Whoa, Lord, oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord, oh, Lord. Said sometimes I'm most tossed it, Lord, and driven. And sometimes I don't know where to run. But I've heard of a city called Glory, and I'm trying to make that city my home.
Somebody might have sat on my bed. And, you know, I really resent it. What are you sitting on my bed for?
You didn't say nothing, Tony! Take it easy! How do I like I didn't break the window! I didn't have to say, Tony, please take it easy, and bang!
Jitney will be loading and leaving in 10 minutes. This is the last jitney of the evening.
All the work here is done by Synanon people, from very basic cleaning all the way up to some major construction. Synanon's a non-profit corporation with Chuck Diedrich as the chairman. The admission costs for someone to get into Synanon vary according to the person. It might be 13 cents or it might be on up to $800 or $900. The reason for that is because it only costs us about $3 per head per day to operate the place, since we do most of the things ourselves, and all the goods and services are donated from the people in the community.
Morning, folks. Louis, you got the weather report, Louis?
The weather for Santa Monica is supposed to be 65, and it's supposed to rain today.
Who'd like to read the thread? Sal?
Please let me first and always examine myself. Let me be honest and truthful. Let me seek and assume responsibility. Let me understand rather than be understood. Let me trust and have faith in myself and my fellow man. Let me love rather than be loved. Let me give rather than receive.
I'd like to welcome two new people this morning, Cheria Turner and Henry Hernandez. They're with us. Anybody have a joke? A nice joke.
Well, you stopped me a little bit there, Mel, on a nice joke, but well, I could give a short talk on sex. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure.
You're doing it again. Get the broom around the other way. That's the idea. Put the hair up on top by your face. Good.
Marv Weinstein, would you please come to the front desk? Marv Weinstein, would you please come to the front desk? You have a telephone call.
Chuck was expelled from Notre Dame College, and then he took various jobs in some of the major corporations, was kind of unhappy and started drinking too much. He became a bona fide drunk. He cured himself of this problem. Now, some of the insights that he derived from this kind of self-help are at the basis of what we do here now. They differ from the professional approach.
Oh, I think he's marvelous. And I've heard him say things like, a year and a half ago, we'll have a city at Tomales Bay, and of course I didn't believe him. And now we have a city, or the beginnings of a city. Everything he says comes true. And he's always available to talk to somebody, and he tells you the truth. He's a marvelous man. He really is.
I said, well, don't sign them out. Go home, folks. You know, we'll see you next Saturday. Yeah, but I have to sign them out, this kid said. I said, no, you don't. I just told you you don't have to. But we always... I said, wait, look, boy, I'm DJ. Don't sign them out. Oh! We've never signed them.
My first impressions were very bad of Chuck. I resented him, and I think I hated him.
Our defense has been an offense, and our offense is very offensive.
Oh, I get mad. If I had some hair, I could pull it out. I get so mad at him sometimes.
There are far more pathetic sights around than some kid running around on the street shooting milk sugar into his arm. What about paraplegics? What about people that are really in trouble?
He was the first person I have ever met that was able to somehow cut through the nonsense. He struck a chord.
When a person comes into Synanon, we do not have on our hands a potentially violent person or a rebel at all. We have then a person that is looking for boundaries. He then is looking for someone to tell him what to do, isn't he? Huh? Does this fit in with your own memory?
I'm quite convinced that he actually knows more about me than I know about myself.
He's probably the most totally honest person I have ever met in my life.
You see, every place where we move in, the neighbors all storm the city council and say, here come the dope fiends. They're going to sack the city. Contrary to this, what you're saying then is that they are rather gentle, and they want to somehow be told what to do, just like children. They want the security of some sensible boundaries. Here we are, right now. Wait a minute, here we are. No, Jimmy, here is why. Wait a minute. You did exactly then, right there, at that moment, what all of your peer group has been doing for the past 2 years. Information was offered to you, and you shouted it down. You shouted it down. You see, everybody can see this. You shouted it down. No, I don't need that. I don't know that. I don't even know that. I don't know that. You said.
Well, I mean, the message has been transmitted all around the world. Everybody told me.
I want to use what you just did.
But everybody told me. Everybody said what.
Hear it.
Now
hear it. Hear it. Hear it.
Hear what?
Hear it.
I think he has a very strange gift. I mean, he's magic, I think.
You know, I feel like I owe him my life.
Maybe the day will come when I no longer get mad at him. I doubt it.
These guys are mostly newcomers. They work here in industries about 3 hours a day. Now, that may not seem very much, but considering that a dope fiend who's been shooting dope and stealing all his life and never been anywhere on time and never done anything with any consistency, that's a lot to start off with. And it just gets him used to the idea of going to a job and doing a thing every day.
At the heart of the matter is the we-they situation which exists in most institutions. You know, most criminals, addicts, and so forth who wind up in hoosgals are fighting authority. So it's they, them, they did this to me and so forth. He's denuded of that rationalization in Synanon because they are him.
B-59. Got that. C-50, capital. Right.
I remember when I came into Synanon, our vehicle situation, for example, was one automobile that only ran backwards. I see it today with 35 trucks, 15,000, I believe, square feet just of warehouse space alone here in Santa Monica. And our rent, I think, was $85 a month when I came in. Today, it's $14,000. Yeah, we've had some quaint characters come in here. One kid, Tony, his route was to steal palm trees. Gives you a real look at the stupidity of a drug addict, because he was the only addict, I guess, in the world who stole trees. Whenever a tree was stolen, they just go pick up Tony. But he didn't have any other game that he knew about. But he had this one rigid procedure. He would go steal a truck somewhere, back it up to a nursery, and take all of the potted palms out of it, or from in front of people's houses, he'd dig them up and go sell them. And then they would just, the vice squad or the narcotics squad, just get in their car, go to wherever Tony was living, clap him in jail. He ran away from here. This was 2 or 3 years ago. He ran away from here after being in residence just a few months. just a kid, and within 17 hours he was in jail, booked for stealing a truck and 7 palm trees. Jimmy's he's about 35 years old now. He was addicted for 10 or 12 years, and was a typical criminal. Jimmy was a hold-up man, a mugger, a real gangster. As a matter of fact, he's not even recognizable as the same person who came in to Synanon. I mean, he was really a bad guy, really incorrigible.
Then I forget. Yeah, there was somebody on the bench.
Jack is a master carpenter and cabinet maker, but he could never hold a job any length of time because he kept returning to drugs, even though, strange enough, he was allergic to drugs. He'd break out in rashes and become violently ill, but he couldn't stay away from it.
You're all set now. You're all set.
I remember the day Betty came into Synanon. Betty had been a drug addict, a drug peddler, and a prostitute and everything, but she did have an occupation. She was a hairdresser that she'd learned earlier, so at times she'd hold down a legitimate job on probation for a while, but then she'd always revert to drugs, and after about, nearly 3 years in Synanon, she was made a director. Shortly after that, she and Chuck Dieter got married.
There's a vehicle now loading and leaving for Industries and number 1. There's a vehicle now loading and leaving for Industries and number 1.
Arlene, how many stops do you have scheduled for tomorrow?
Sherry, when you finished over there, will you take the rest of these regular thank yous, the company ones?
95 cents a piece.
On deal.
The 12 footers are $1.40.
An addict running loose in the streets is stealing roughly $75 to $100 a day to support his habit. If he's caught, and he is quite often, by the hiring of good police departments, he is then tucked away in a cage, and it costs another $25 or so to support him in that particular place for a day. Synanon receives these kinds of people, like myself, as I used to be, and makes it possible for us to live drug-free, crime-free, for roughly $3 a day.
Yo, Al. Yeah, Kevin. Put up some leather case, okay?
Happy? Oh, I wouldn't say happy. That's kind of a hard word for me to even understand. I would say that I'm a lot more stable than I ever was in my life before. And I feel good about it. I'm not jubilant or joyous or anything, but I feel good.
Slip on the jacket first, Virginia, when you got a better idea.
Isn't that beautiful?
Well, it might fit.
How is it in relationship to the other skirt?
I don't know. I think it'll change when you get it on, as all things do. But we can, now that I've learned to do hems.
This is the first suit I have found since I've been here. Beautiful.
there's been many times in my life, in the throes of withdrawal, that I would have welcomed the opportunity to have someone, some doctor or some authority, administer an overdose of narcotics to me to get me out of my misery. And I'm sure you all have some thoughts on this. Louis.
I don't agree with mercy killing when it comes down to me. I can't see anybody wanting to kill me. You know, like you say, thank God there is a Synanon because I have like a different outlook now. I'm still alive. I would have been very sorry if somebody would have killed me, and I would have missed this.
Of course, we can't all sleep in the clubhouse. We have apartments up and down the beach where people live. For instance, a married person might live in one of the apartments.
The experience of being married, which is something that along with all the rest of my insanities, I swore that I would never do, you know, and I find it quite different from what I thought it was or could have been, because I had my values as far as marriage based on something unrealistic altogether. And it's given me some beautiful moments. I love my...
Lena was a drug peddler on the street and a prostitute, and has emerged into a regular matron, you might say. She belongs to the PTA in Santa Monica. She's even a head of a brownie troupe. She's happily married to Wilbur now. And
I always have to start looking at myself. I have to criticize myself first.
Wilbur was a stick-up man and a dope peddler. And
it was never me. It was always society. It wasn't that I was a bad student. It was that my teacher was stupid and didn't know how to teach. It wasn't that I was a thief and running around stealing. It was these no-good policemen who were always beating me up and throwing me in jail.
There are two basic rules here at Synanon. One is no chemicals of any kind, that includes alcohol, and the other one is no physical violence. Of course, from time to time, people get out of hand, and we deal with this with a sort of verbal attack.
Fellas, we got a nut here who keeps talking negative and is trying to get one of our new girls to leave with him. What are we going to do about this thing?
There's a whole big wide world of used drugs out there. If you don't like what we have to offer, well, why don't you just leave? Because we're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior.
No, I don't want to argue with you. You know, it's... Want to be a tough guy? Do it somewhere else.
Well, what'd you go to jail for?
You know, I was using drugs.
What kind of drugs?
Marijuana.
Well, think about that. A grown man who goes to jail because he collected some weeds that he smokes now and then. It makes him giggle.
Your problem is not drug addiction. It's stupidity is your problem.
Now, some people have felt that this kind of verbal attack may be an assault on the person's dignity. But in a fascinating way, a good synonist attacks the behavior rather than the person.
You've got a big job to do. Now, you can help us do it. Understand that? Or else you can go and die alone. How do you feel about that?
I don't like it.
You don't like it? Well, that's too bad. How do you feel about us not caring about what you like or don't like?
I don't like that either.
What are we going to do with you?
I don't care what you do with this guy. You can throw him out if you want to.
We're going to shave your head, and if you don't like it, we will allow you to walk down the highway and trip over the first open manhole you come to, or let some poor person in the Salvation Army give you a bowl of soup.
And another thing, we're not only going to shave your head, we're going to take you off of your job. We're going to put you back in the dish tub where you belong and let you play around on the living room floor like children do. And if we hear one more word of negativity out of you, this is not a court of law. We don't have to prove it. If we just hear of it, I'm telling you now, you're gone.
You can't hide in Synanon. A person can't come into Synanon and stay a year and just mark time or vegetate. The dynamic will spit him out. You just can't stay in Synanon and do nothing. You have to grow.
So many moves around here. It's a little bit confusing.
Cooking and coffee for the girls. And they have some black drapes, and I know that's kind of a dull color, but still like the black drapes, and if you want to, we can lay the cocktails that you made in San Diego.
But believe me, it's really rough. And I thought it would get better, as the time went on.
I was thinking while you're talking when I was here 18 months, I don't know whether I felt the same way you do. I just know that my first year was miserable.
See, Talking Blues started in the 30s, and they wrote some union things. And we're going to do one about Synanon.
It is now 15 minutes until Synanon game time. Synanon games will be called in 15 minutes.
It's kind of dragged, just sitting around and looking around.
Just the same, it's the roughest thing, it's the roughest year I've ever put in.
Well, let's face it, Vera, it's not easy for a grown person. I don't care how immature you're told you are. At least it's not easy for me to be told, what time to get up and where to work and who to do it for and to check out when I go to a movie. I'm a 26-year-old woman.
Now, Lynn, you want this seam brought down right where you have the pins?
Yeah, just right on the inside,
Practically everything I did was so destructive. The child was upset constantly, insecure, moving from place to place. And finally, I had to send him to his father. And when he came down to me, I was either drunk or under the influence of a drug. He saw this. He saw me attempt suicide. I guess his memories of me must be very, very bad. I don't know if he really would want to be with me after all this. But as time passes, he'll probably forget a lot of this. And when he comes down, hoping that this will happen, he comes down, he'll see a new me.
5 minutes until Synanon game time. Will everyone please get their coffee and be seated now? It is now 5 minutes to Synanon game.
Well, the Synanon game is really the most exciting part of Synanon and the most interesting. There may be, 10, 20 games going on simultaneously in the house. It's about 8 or 10 people gathered together in a room.
Marvin Gordon, Dave Behar, Janice A. Hold up for a second, Marvin, before you go. Big Man Storm, Joanne Poole, Bill Burns, Jerry Rush, Barbara Caritas.
Each person in the game enters the game with certain defenses, which we all have. Now, the group, by means of a verbal attack, singles out one person at a time, attacks that person, and shatters his defenses. And then the game switches to the next person, and so on it goes, with no professional direction. The game just sort of happens.
Gloria Miller, Vivian Mann, and Art Callender.
You can hear Synanon games sometimes all the way across the street. We've had neighbors complain about the language used in the Synanon game. No language is prohibited. Every conceivable kind of emotionally laden swear word and everything just comes all gushing out of this guy's mouth.
You're a low-life creep. You know that? You're a no-class bastard. That's all you are, a no-class bastard. That's all you'll ever be.
Incredible. We have a man here hollering at other man and he's shaking. He's threatening to beat him up and he's terrified.
I've never really seen you let your hair down yet. I'm not sure. Maybe this is just you. I've never seen you really get loose. You know, like a woman would in her home. You always seem so perfectly in place. I imagine everybody in this room knows they don't have no friends out there. You know, guys that really went at it. You know, and did something. You know what I mean? I grew up with guys, you know, from like this high, you know, and I took many an overdose, you know, on the roof, and they left me, brother. I grew up with them, and they left me to die, you know, and they beat my junk. They took my work, they took everything, you know, and I grew up with them. You might say they were my brothers. You know, brothers like this, you don't need. You don't need them.
I
really don't feel different.
Only lived with
listen.
a guy because he was a doctor and he could give you junk, but he wasn't a prostitute.
Well, I didn't live with him for that reason. That became a side issue. You know, like
No, but that was
really
like
beside the
95% of the reason.
point. You know,
Like having so you mean there's a difference between being a whore and a harlot?
and a mistress?
No, I didn't say anything about mistress.
Well, that's what I said.
You know, I say, is there a difference between being a whore and a harlot?
No. Not in English language, there is.
Yeah. Well,
Why did you live with this doctor?
What?
Why did you live with this doctor? It's not to get some junk off of him that you knew you can get.
Because I loved him.
You know, like everything I'd see him do before, like I'd laugh, I'd applaud, I thought he was great. And then like it all turned around and everything I saw I hated. I just hated Chuck Diederich.
So how did this guy hook you?
Well, like for instance, when I had a bad headache, he'd give me a shot of Demerol instead of an aspirin or something like that. Like if he wanted to do something and I didn't feel like going. And he put me to sleep sometimes with mainline Nembutal.
you knew what these things were, didn't you?
Of course, I
You knew what they
studied
would do?
pharmacology in college. Of course I do.
If you knew what they were, why did you take them?
Why? Because I enjoyed them.
Then he didn't hook you.
Then he didn't hook
He didn't hook you then.
I hooked myself.
You talk about what you would like to see. Why don't you go ahead and
When we discussed going out, I said, listen, I'm going to ask Marvin and a few of the
No,
fellows.
you did not.
Yes, I
You did not.
No, you see, you're wrong.
Hey, Jack, your responsibility towards Synanon, and you also have a responsibility towards your wife. Where do you draw the line?
I haven't drawn a line. I never have.
You want unconditional love, and I'm going to stop it, you know. I don't approve of, you know, like, no, I was very hurt last night. You are a very considerate person to everyone except me. You know, you really think about people, and you really take this guy into consideration. He's not feeling too good. Let's take him out. Let's cheer him up. Let's talk to him. One guy, hundreds of guys. You know, but how much understanding am I going to have? You know, when are you going to give me a little bit, like once a year?
I think she's got a point, John.
I'm not telling you it's me or them.
You retreat.
I'm not saying me or them. I'm saying give me a little of what you give everyone else.
And yet, when anybody puts a question to you, you are never able to give a direct answer. And I don't think you're never able to. I think you don't choose to.
Maybe there's some little part of you that wants Bobby as a sick little boy. He can run to Mama and get $3 and a pat on the head.
I never felt that he needed me.
Okay.
He never came to me. But you could manage him better.
Well, it was an indifference. Manage it. He didn't care.
I'm more interested in anything you or anybody has to say, any kind of discussion. If I hear something going on, I'll read something.
You've got a taste for learning.
She likes to get things from the book, you know. Me myself, I've never been able to get anything from a book, you know.
Have you ever read a book
just
in your life?
Let me finish talking, you know. Like, I use my wits, you know. I mean, like, I'm a fast thinker, you know.
Me, this is what you want to know, and I'm telling you.
It's a hell of a sick need you got.
You're insane.
Why, did this bother you? Oh, you want to give it to me, I'll do it. You don't want to give it, don't give it to me.
What have you learned? Nothing.
You can't even relax with yourself.
You know, maybe if you cut all that loose and just try to relax a little bit and get down with people like as Joe, not Joe Pimp. You know, maybe you'd feel a little better.
what you said, man, has been said to me 1,000 times, you know.
Why don't you absorb some of
You
what
went
you
on
said?
down, man, because
Instead of
you
blocking
want to make it
somebody.
tell me that I got to go back to the joint. You're going to tell me that I got to shoot.
Hey, you want me to show you how you can go back to the joint?
Tell me what I can do.
Baby, next time you stay back up against the wall, baby, you know, hands against the wall, you know, then you come back and you come cry on our shoulder.
I'm not going to cry.
Hey, Bob, when you go out there, you're going to cop someday.
What I'm trying to learn is to have some warmth. I don't know how.
Truthfully, there are certain people in Synanon that I'd like to avoid.
Are not overjoyed, flowing with happiness, you know, are not Mr. Happy.
What makes me uncomfortable? Oh, a lot of things, man. Talking to a lot of people.
I've got a problem with people.
It's hard for me to, like, ask people to do something because I don't want to hear about it later.
I have no friends in the house, none at all.
Really, I'm more comfortable, you know, alone.
You know, a lot of times I don't feel like saying anything. I feel like just going, foul.
It's when I'm being, you know, like she says, making conversation or trying to be friendly that I'm acting like I think people will like. Most of the time, I really, you know, I really don't see enough in people. You know, I would rather not be talking to them. I would rather not talk at Saturday night meetings. I would rather not talk at seminars.
You never really talk to people just like people, but
I
you
don't,
always
because I
have
don't
to be,
see 'em.
Like teaching them something when you're talking to them. Do you see what I mean?
I've been
Do you
told it,
understand?
yeah.
You know, like you don't have to learn something every time you talk. And really, like maybe you don't know that much about everything.
Of course, you keep saying the contradicting thing. I want friends. I want people to like
I wish
me.
it were easy for me to have friends. I do.
You know, but it's not.
Well, did you hear the words that came out of your mouth before?
I prefer
rather
a
not.
book and a cup of coffee.
Yeah, because I don't know how to make people friendly toward me.
There has not been one single person who split from one. And you know how many people have split since 1958? I think it's something like 500 people. You know, and there hasn't, wait a minute, shut up a minute. There hasn't been one stayed clean, baby, not one.
I believe because I have faith in myself, you know.
You had faith in your fucking months ago. Didn't you?
Let me say something.
Didn't you have faith in
You
yourself?
all keep talking all the time. You got to do right.
All my life,
You got to do right.
Listen to me, I'll shut up.
Shut up.
That's why.
That this bitch didn't even give me help. Alone! Alone! No, don't tell me now! I put my blood in that thing! Will you put your mouth? That's all you ever put! I swallow all your trouble!
So what? Your life is right on the door.
And your mother sent you back here!
Well, that'll show you how much you felt.
I never will.
He's a lame. He don't do nothing. I'm gonna get back.
Help him out, damn it!
But why don't you help?
I do I help
What do you do?
Nervous tensions, there's no that makes you like
Don't
this.
feel or not?
What do you mean you don't know?
I just
They want to get it.
Oh, you bring it back 2 months ago, huh?
Every day.
2 months ago, you come in.
I got a pamper you. I got a pamper you.
You don't gotta pamper us.
Pamper you.
You're pampering yourself.
Oh, I'm pampering.
You're pampering yourself. Because we all, we're all waiting there. You wear it right away.
Hey, what are you playing in the nomination for?
I have learned to laugh. I thought laughter was only to hide something. I never knew laughter just for laughter's sake, or crying for crying's sake, or loving for loving's sake. I found out that you can just be rather than have a reason for being all the time.
I don't have to be the very best at everything I do anymore. I'm learning how to take some kind of rejection, which was always a terrible thing with me. And now I've learned that life, of course, is not one whole string of perfect actions. And I'm learning how to accept that feeling that comes from you when you know you haven't done possibly the very, very best that can be done, but you've done the best you can do. It's a good feeling.
Understanding is usually confused with sympathy. They didn't do that here. They literally trapped me into walking just enough steps till I found myself, and I guess Thomas Wolfe said it. He said, you can't go home anymore. If you begin walking, you can't go home anymore.
This is NET, the National Educational Television Network.